With all the problems going on around in the world today, one of the biggest questions that we are trying to find the answer for is, what is a man or what is a woman? These are the debates raging up and down, not only in this country, but throughout the world, where this new gender politics, identity politics, gender fluidity debates are now dominating the conversations. We now will be asking why. We need to go back to the basics, because men are suffering from an identity crisis, a masculinity crisis in this modern day and age. And to discuss this all important topic with us, I have a guest all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, Jerry Adams, an author who has authored a book on this specialist topic about masculinity. Jerry Adams, welcome to our podcast.
Zafar, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's great to be here. Great to talk to you. I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's an important one.
A very important one, which is dividing opinion around the world at the moment as to, when people ask, what is a woman? What is a man? Are these genders fluid? Are they a social construct? But I don't think you believe all that, do you? I mean, I'm presuming, sorry, I don't want to answer on your behalf.
No, I believe God created man and woman, and pretty straightforward. I'm a straightforward, simple kind of guy. As you mentioned, back to the roots, and I think we live in a time. You and I talked a little bit before we rolled here. We live in a time where men don't really have a good vision for what it means to be a man. And as a result, I think a lot of these things come in and they sweep a lot of people away, and they get caught up in the stream of what's going on in the world because they have no vision of what it means to be a man. And
so let's
that's
ask
a dangerous
you then.
thing.
You've authored the book on modern man and the masculinity crisis. So the title of your book is Men of Grit, Strong as Steel. So what is a man?
Well, you could probably go back to the chromosomes and talk about that, but a man is a being that God has created and is put in a position to bring strength into this world and bring structure and to bring bring that kind of thing into the world. And man was created by God to reflect Him, and is the pinnacle of all creation. And woman was made from man by God and made to help man, to be the helpmate.
So that sounds all a bit misogynist now in this modern day and age. A lot of feminists will argue that you're putting a man above the woman in terms of a status. So isn't that coming across a little bit of a misogynist thing to say?
Yeah, it's a shame that we have a lot of the labels that we have, because I think what happens is that tears down the ability to have a conversation. A lot of times we will label each other misogynist or whatever, and then we never have that opportunity to sit down and really talk, because we're like, okay, you're on the opposite team, so I totally disregard you. But for me, it's important to understand how God feels about this, and I'm a Christian, and the basis of the Christian faith is the scriptures, the Bible, and so we go back to the scriptures, the foundational scriptures, to try to understand how does God feel about this? What are His thoughts on men and women and the role of marriage in this world and community and what that's supposed to look like? And so for me, that's where my foundation is, and that's my concern. It's more about what does God say about what it means to be a
Jerry,
man.
as a Muslim, I mean, I also subscribe to the tenets of faith and how God has created man in as a best of creation, and what the roles for the man and woman are in society have clearly been demarcated by Almighty God. But the problem is that me and you sitting here being like-minded may believe that and agree to each other, but we live in a more increasingly atheistic society where the belief in major religions and God are diminishing. So how do we convince the masses that their sort of ideologies and their beliefs have been watered down, corrupted now over the centuries to the current level of crisis that we're at?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. In my mind, I work as a leader. I've been a leader most of my adult life. I've been in leadership type positions. And I think one of the keys to leading people is be the example. And so to answer that question, I think the first and foremost thing that we do is be the man that God has created us to be the example. And when you are the example, you live a life in a way that, I have a great marriage. It took work, and a lot of that work had to do with the very thing that we're talking about. Is I needed to become the man, a strong man. And when I say strong man, strong in body, mind, and spirit across the board, and bring that strength into the world around me, into my relationship with my wife, into my family. And then you become that example. And when people see that example in the world, then you earn the right to speak. Your words have meaning when they look and they see that you are living what you say. And then you open up to influence people. How many times have we been online where we have somebody talking about health or fitness or something like that, but then we look at a picture of them and they're not healthy and they're not fit. And it's like, why would you listen to someone like that? And so to me, our example is key to a lot of this, and
It's like
staying on the course.
going to your GP to get health advice, and he may be clinically obese, him or herself.
Yes. Yeah. It's a crazy world that we live in when we see people in these types of positions of influence, and yet they're not living what they're saying. And so why would anybody even listen to a person like that? So I think you gain credibility by living the life in a way that is attractive, that people understand, wow, you figured something out, and you have a lot of things. It might be the relationship with your wife, the relationship with your children, your family, how you carry yourself, that people say, wow, that's attractive. I want to know more. I want to understand where you're coming from.
Jerry, obviously we've spoken that there's no denying this fact that there is a modern day masculinity crisis in men. What are the symptoms of that crisis? What are we seeing? What's the results that we are seeing over all those years, decades of reducing masculinity, decreasing masculinity in the men? What are we seeing?
Well, you can get down to the personal level. Well, there's a lot of things you're seeing. What's happening is men are on the sidelines. Instead of being in a position of leadership, men have given over that position, and they've gotten very comfortable on the sideline. I say many times in my social media, I write about it in the book. It's what happened to me, is that a lot of people in this world are chasing comfort, and comfort leads to complacency, and complacency kills the masculine soul, because a big part about being masculine, being a man, is that we do the hard things. We lean into things that are difficult to do. We confront the issues that need to be confronted. We say the words that need to be said. We are built for that. That's what I believe God has built us for, is to be the one that when there's something that needs to be done that nobody wants to do, but it needs to be done for the betterment of everyone. Those are the types of things that I believe men are called to do, because we have cowered, because we have chased after comfort, thinking that the world owes us something. We have gone down this road of comfort, and then that leads to complacency. And then there are things that, in our marriages and things like that, that aren't getting done. And what happens is our wives have to step up to those things. And when the wife has to step up to do the role that the man was called to be, what happens in that relationship is you lose polarity, because she is becoming more masculine. And so now she's becoming more masculine. The man is becoming more feminine. They are alike in the way that they conduct their lives. There's no desire because there's no polarity between that, and the marriage dies. And men wonder why they live lives. They've been married for a period of time, and they believe the lie that the spark just goes away and the relationship dies, and they believe that lie. And what they don't realize is that because we are believing the world around us, and we are becoming less of what we are supposed to be, less masculine, more feminine, that what we're doing is we're killing the polarity between ourselves and our wives. And when we do that, everything dies with that, and that spark dies. And I found myself in that going down that road, and had to do the work to change that and correct it. And that's really where the book came from. It came from that, and honoring my dad, who passed away a few years ago. So, but that's where this book came from. So what I offer in the book is a vision and a direction for men to go to become the masculine, strong man, so that they can lead, and not lead as a dictator, but lead as the example. Lead as a man that is strong and powerful and knows how to love and is self-disciplined. Things that
Jerry,
doesn't see very often.
I want to come on to the book in a short while, but I'm going to defend the men who are suffering from this decrease in masculinity, because we live in a day and age now where the opportunities that were afforded to men previously to express, develop, and reveal their masculinity are hugely diminished now. Those opportunities. We've had a huge decimation of manufacturing industries, traditional industries, which were very much associated with men who used to really roll up their sleeves and do the hard labor and work on the fields, in the factories, steel industries, on the roads. Now you have men sitting at home on their bum in front of a computer for 8 hours a day, because the jobs are all sitting on your bum and not doing the physical output, output that our ancestors used to do. So, the opportunities have diminished. I mean, what do you say about that?
Yeah, that's a great point. I write about that in my book, because I think the times have changed. And to your point, it used to be that it took effort to live. And so men were always leaning into hard things because it was hard to live. And today it's not. Today it's easy. And so what we find today, which is different than the past, is that men, they need to create things in their lives to push into hard things. For me, I wake up every morning, 4:30 in the morning, and I work out, and I do it every day, 7 days a week. I'm doing something. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. And a lot of it has to do with exactly what you're talking about. I grew up in a steel mill, and now I'm a general manager. So I'm not nearly as active during the day. I'm not doing physical things like I used to do. And so, I need to push myself into that. But you push yourself into hard things. And so that is this, what you speak about here is something that men are dealing with today, is that we don't have that, where we have to exert ourselves in our workday. And so we are in a position where we need to create that in our lives, because life is difficult. Life is hard. Life is about hardship.
Is it?
And well, let me give the dichotomy here. Okay. So it's easy because of the things that you described. Jobs, we sit in front of a computer and things like that. Okay.
Social security.
Yes. Okay. But difficult in that things come your way, whether it's paying your bills, whether it's the relationship with your wife, building those relationships. There are things that come at you in the day-to-day that you need to be able to, things don't go your way. I'll say it that way. And I think men need to build up this ability to be able to handle the things that don't go their way, the things that are difficult. In the middle of the day when your wife calls and says, hey, I just blew out a tire, I'm alongside the highway, I don't know what to do because I can't change the tire or whatever. What are you going to do as a man? How are you going to handle those kinds of things when someone you love passes away and they die, and now you got to face that, and are you going to be the type of man that adds to the problem? In other words, you're going to just bring a whole lot of emotion and take a difficult situation and make it even more difficult? Or are you going to be the one that comes in that provides the strength in the storm? You're going to be the rock that says, you know what? I routinely do hard things. And because I routinely do hard things, I can handle the difficulties. And so when the stuff hits the fan and you come in, you are that calming agent. You are the one that others look to and they say, okay, my world's upside down. Now what do I do? And you're the one that can come into that situation and be calm and think and be a rock that other people can anchor to. My life mission statement is honor God, be true to the man in the mirror, and be a rock for those around me.
Fantastic.
That's why I train. That's why I do the things that I do to make myself stronger, because that's what I want to do in life. When I get to the end of my life, I want people to look at my life and say, that man honored God in the way he conducted himself. He was true to the man in the mirror. In other words, he wasn't influenced by the opinions of others, the validation of others, the need to be validated, the expectations of others. He lived who he was called to be, who God made him to be. And then he was a rock for those around me. So I want to be the guy that can be the strength in the storm. So.
What I said earlier is it's a lot easier to get by now. We have social security that will put food on the table for us as a bare minimum to help us survive. Men are no longer the breadwinners who have to go and hunt and gather to get the food and to put on the table. We can sit there, even if we do get a job. As I said, we're sitting driving all day, or we're sitting in the office all day. And that is going to cause you, if you're not doing any other physical activity, that's going to either lead to obesity through the overeating and lack of burning the calories, or muscle atrophy. And that's why you see a lot of guys now, this day and age, which I absolutely detest, is when I see a guy with a big belly, skinny arms, and an ass that looks like it's dissolved. There's not a single bit of muscle left in that, because that's quite a very a sad physical manifestation of man this day and age. And hence why myself, I try and work out at home a little bit. I've started gardening, doing manual work like digging in the garden, just to stay connected to these sort of tasks that which our ancestors did to feel more masculine. And my question to you is that why is it that as men we've lost interest in these things? Because you have to force yourself to go and dig the garden when you're living a life of a sedentary lifestyle. It's because is it because we're too busy now, or we can't be bothered? What is it?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. So I'm a part of a men's group. It's called the Fraternity of Excellence, and it's a purposeful move on my part to be around men that are not what you just described, because what I've found is being around those kind of men, they move me to a better place. I'm influenced by them, and we have relationships that we won't allow each other to go down the wrong path. We will call each other out. We will come alongside. We will help each other. So, but that's a difficult situation. That what you're talking about is that I think the again, to me, it comes back to the example. I know around me there have been people in my family and outside and in my workplace that they've seen the changes in me, and they ask questions, and soon they come and say, "Hey, I'm starting to work out. Hey, I'm starting to eat differently." And I never said, I just answered their questions, and I just lived it in front of them to influence them. And they're out there. Like there are people on Twitter. You can find people on Twitter. There's people out there in social media that are going down a different path. They're going against the flow. They're doing the things that you described. And you can follow these people, and you can find the ones that are really truly authentic. And again, to me, I went into a men's group specifically for that reason, because what I realized is that you can get caught up in the flow of the world around you. It's really easy to justify the fact that you're 25 pounds overweight. And the world helps you with that. Like, you don't have to look very far. The world's going to help you continue to stay where you are and be the one that and it's the few that go against that flow. Yeah. And for me, there's something deep inside of me as a man where I want to go against that flow. Like there's
individual choice.
Fire.
It's an individual choice.
It really is, and it's hard to get. What I've discovered being around men that are really doing well in life. When you sit and you talk to them, which is something we don't do very well in today's world, you sit and you talk and try to find out where they come from. It's often they came from a place of they were in a bad place and they knew they needed to change their life. They either went through a divorce, went through a difficult relationship, lost a job. Something happened in their life that triggered them to say, man, I'm going down the wrong path. I need to go down a different path. And what I've found is the men that really do well, most of them have some kind of story like that. And that becomes the fire.
Yeah. So what was your story?
Yeah. So for me, I think my story is very similar to a lot of the guys that we're talking about. Is I was checking off all the boxes. We kind of have this picture of what it means to, as you get older, you become an adult, then you go out and you get whatever education you need, you land the job, you start progressing in the job and doing well in that. You find the woman that you want to marry, you marry, you have the kids, you buy the house, you buy the car, you start checking off the list. And men are really good at chasing after things. Men are really good at the pursuit. And the problem often comes in when we pursue, and we check, got that. And then, then that comfort starts to become the goal in life. It's like, okay, I got the house, so now I'm going to do all the things that I want to do. I got the money, so now I can do all this stuff, and the comfort sets in. Then comes the complacency. And then the complacency starts to kill that drive, that fire inside that had you pursuing, and you stop pursuing. You stop the improvement and all that you were doing to boost the relationship and chase the girl, and you get the girl and you marry and you go through all that. Well, that happened to me. And, I had a blood test, and I went to the doctor. I wasn't feeling real good. I got a blood test, and a lot of my numbers were going in the wrong direction. And the instinct of the doctor right away was they were going to put me on medication. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. And I said, and in my mind, I was like, I'm going to try to fix this. I'm going to start eating right. I'm going to start exercising. I went to, Jocko Willink has a thing. He wrote the book Extreme Ownership, and he had these muster events, and I went to one in Chicago, and they had morning PT at 4:30 in the morning. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm probably going to
What is
die
that? Sorry, elaborate for the
physical training
like us. Okay.
Yeah, physical training. So it was a leadership conference, but in the morning they did physical training early in the morning. And it was part of the conference, and you didn't need to go, but I said, I'm going to go. I did that, and I almost threw up on the guy next to me. I was so out of shape. And it revealed my condition, which then made me start to think about all the other things. Made me realize that my complacency led to the thing that we described earlier. My wife started having to do some of the things that I should have been taking care of. I was disconnected. I would go home and walk through the door and think, I worked hard at work. I deserve to rest. And she's there like thinking, my man is arriving home. The father is coming in the door. The man that should be helping with this family. And my thought process was, hey, I earned the rest. I want to sit on the couch and watch the football game, and nothing wrong with those things, but you don't do those things at the expense of your responsibilities as a man. And so I fell into that, and it almost killed my relationship with my wife. And we were not in a good place. And so I started down this path, and I looked in the church, and I looked in some different places to try to find what I needed, because I knew I needed something, like I needed to really change. I needed to put a lot of effort into this. And I found myself in a lot of these cases looking around and saying to myself, I don't see a man here that is a man that I want to be like. And that's a problem, because how are they going to help me? And so that's what led me to joining the Fraternity of Excellence, was that it was designed for men to become better, stronger men. And in the process of that, it's amazing how that fixes so many other things. And so I started to talk to guys and learn from men that had been down the path that I was down. And they connected they were like, yeah, I've been there, brother. I was there 5 years ago. Let me tell you what I did. And so you get all this advice from men, because, the reality of it is men need to stop going to women to figure out how to be a man. They go to counselors.
That's the problem. The women are telling the
Absolutely.
men how to become men and what constitutes a good man. And a lot of them
Yes.
are, what's the word, feminizing these men, right? Giving
Yes.
them their own feminine version of what a man should be like. And that's why, even within marriages, we touched upon earlier, why we have crises where there is this no longer this polarity of the yin and the yang, where they are sort of, there's a fusion of the two roles, and maybe the woman is more dominant than the man, which in your relationship, if that works for you, great, fantastic. But what we're saying is that that's not the way it should be. If for the man to thrive and for that relationship to thrive, that the man has to be at the helm of that relationship.
Yeah, and you need to
Now, let me
be
clarify. If there's anybody
a
watching,
man.
I'm not saying at the helm of that relationship as a dictator or an authoritarian figure, but as a leader,
Absolutely.
as a moral,
Absolutely.
spiritual, and a decent leader who is at the helm of that family to keep it together and steer it towards the right path.
Yeah, you need to become the kind of man that your wife admires. I remember when my wife and I were not in a good place. I remember the pain of the way she looked at me. And
Okay.
guys that are in that place today, they know what I'm talking about. When she looks at you in a way that she doesn't respect you and she doesn't admire you. And so, I did a lot of work. I got myself squared away in my mind and my body. Started with working out, and then that went to mind and spiritual to fix a lot of that.
And what people don't realize, when you're in that situation, the actual attraction fizzles out of that relationship as well, where your wife is no longer attracted to you because you are not that sort of man that she would like you to be. She may not even say it, but subconsciously, women want that man to be the leader who can lead them, who can protect them, and who can basically take care of them. And now we have a society where if the man is, again, it is not a criticism. If he works for you and you like this, that's good luck to you. But if you have a situation where the man is at home, he's a house husband, he's looking after the children, just because the wife earns more money than him and they've made that choice, I genuinely feel that the women will never be able to respect that man as a man deserves to be respected and should be respected, because he's not fulfilling that role of leadership the way he was meant to be.
Yeah, I think that you hit the key word for a man: respect. A man to the love side of the relationship for us is to be respected, and we are called to love our wives, and the wife is called to respect her husband.
Yeah.
The problem is that too many of us as men, and I was there, are not worthy of respect. And it starts in your own head. When I was in that bad place, I looked myself in the mirror and I looked in my eyes in the mirror and I didn't respect myself. Like, I didn't love myself. And I don't mean love in a narcissistic way. I mean care for myself. Like, you could see physically, I was overweight. I was not caring for myself. Mentally, I wasn't in the right place. I was influenced by outside influences instead of being strength and being a strong man in my head. I wasn't. And so when you don't respect yourself, how do you expect anyone else to respect you? But the opposite happens too. When you get to the point where you're solid in who you are, what you're about, where you're going, your mission in life, when you're solid in all those things, there's nothing from the outside world that can move you. And that's the kind of strength that we need in marriages, and a wife loves to be able to lean up against a man that she knows it doesn't matter what this world brings our way. He's got it. He's going to handle it. And that's what's missing in a lot of cases. And the reason that men can't handle it is because they haven't done the hard work to become stronger. And there's an interrelationship between your body, your fitness level, and your mental abilities and your spiritual, all those things, they're all tied together to make up the man. And you can't be weak in one and then expect to bring the kind of strength into the world that God has designed us to bring. You need all three intertwined, and then you'll be able to control your emotions and those kinds of things, and bring strength.
Physical, mental, spiritual strength is what I say. And what would you say, how important is it for a man to look physically fit, ripped, muscular, maybe not like, Mr. Universe, but he has to have a certain element of a certain physique which corresponds to looking like a healthy, strong man. Because when I look at young guys today, I think it's quite a sad indictment of the men of today that they don't look like men. They're very, very skinny. A lot of them look malnourished. They don't dress like men, which a lot of people will pick up a fight on just on that statement. But the fact is that you are undermining your value, undermining your character as a man if you don't physically display the manifestations of what it needs to be to look like a strong man.
Sure. And there's a confidence that comes with that also. When a man, it's an interesting thing, and I'm not saying that this happens to everybody, but I've talked to and I've been around and I've helped enough men to know that this happens a lot. So you're standing in a room and a guy comes walking in that's physically fit, and you're not. Many men already take themselves and put themselves here, and that guy becomes this. Just by looks. Because he comes walking in, he walks with confidence, he looks strong, he looks like he should be the leader. And people don't like to hear that, but that is what it happens that way. Now, the guy may speak and he may lead you otherwise, right? You may say, well, okay, the guy doesn't have anything together. But most of the time, there's a connection between your strength or your fitness and your confidence as a man. Because a lot of times when we're out of shape and we're carrying a lot of extra weight and we feel this almost like we feel this inadequacy. And a lot of people don't want to face that, but that's real. And the other side is the effort that it takes to get into shape, the discipline that it takes to eat right and do all the things that make you physically fit. At the same time, they make you mentally strong.
Yeah.
And there are many times that I've said that my workouts, that I gained more mental strength than I did physical strength from the workout. And I feel that way a lot of times.
How many hours do you work out in a day?
A lot of times I don't work out. I work out every day. I usually I am doing weight training 3 to 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. And then in between, I'll do some kind of cardio and core type exercises. And when I do the cardio core, it might only be 20, 25 minutes.
Okay.
It's
about being consistent, isn't it? Doing something every day.
It is. Yeah. Consistency is the key. And I tell guys, if you can be consistent and just start, my philosophy is I look in the mirror and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do something today to make the guy I see today a little bit better than the guy I saw there yesterday. That's
Fantastic.
it. That's my competition. My competition
Absolutely.
is the man in the mirror. And the man in the mirror is also the one that's going to move me. Nobody else is coming to help me and move me. It's going to be me. And so, it's interesting that the man in the mirror is both your number one competition. He's the one that's going to keep you from going down the path you want to go, but he's also going to be the one that gets you there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I always say to people, nobody is going to come breaking your door down to grab you by the collarbone and say, listen, you've got to change yourself. You've got to get into the gym, eat healthy, and do things differently in order to change your life. That's what the biggest problem is, that nobody is going to do that for you. And that's why everybody has to be a self-starter and be self-motivated. And unfortunately, the way the society is programmed now, everybody is so easily conditioned to do the things of the least resistance. It's so much easy to go to the takeaway and eat the burgers and the chips and the soda and the fatty foods and enjoy the delights of all the different cuisines. It's so easy to sit in front of the TV and watch all the box sets, and so easy to be surfing on the internet for hours and hours. And this is what's damaging us in every shape or form. Physically, as I've outlined to you, mentally, because you're doing the most dumb things by sitting there and just being entertained for hours and hours, and damaging you spiritually, because all these other things will have an effect in the spirit. And one of the biggest issues which I covered in a previous podcast is the crisis of internet pornography addiction that men are engrossed in, which again damages their spirituality, but it actually also damages every other aspect of their life, because physically it damages them and mentally it drains them. And that's why, we live in a time where it seems like all the factors are there to go against the masculine man, to steal his masculinity.
Yeah, and you hit on it. I mean, there's 20-some-year-old men today that are suffering from ED.
Yeah.
That are young men. They go and they get married, and they can't have sexual relations with their wives because their stuff doesn't work, and it doesn't work because they've had already 10 years of time with pornography, and so now the only thing that impacts them is pornography, and the real doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And it does something to the brain, and there's science to it. There's things that are released in the brain, and there's neural pathways that are burned within the brain that suck a man into it, almost like a drug addiction. And it's hard. I got a good friend of mine that helps men, gain freedom from that. Timothy Regal, and he's on Twitter, and he's a good friend of mine, and he's my accountability brother. So I it's one of those things that we need to surround ourselves. To your point earlier, we need to surround ourselves with the type of men that are going down the path that we want to go down, and you need to be purposeful about that, because, as you said, the entire world around us is taking us down this easy path.
It's a conspiracy to destroy them, man.
Yeah, sure. And you put yourself, and that's one of the reasons why I went into the fraternity of excellence, was because I wanted to be around men that were the top 10%, the top 5%. I wanted to be around men that figured some things out, and so many men, when you surround yourself with other strong men, all the things that you think you need from a counselor or going to get this help or that help. And there are times where you need some professional help. I'm not saying that, but
Yeah.
what I am saying is a large percentage of those problems are resolved when you're around other men that already
Absolutely.
traveled the path.
Absolutely.
Because men we know, like, we talk to each other differently. Like, we know when we can say, "Hey man, come on. You're just slacking off, and I'm not buying your BS. Let's go." And we know we can have those kinds of conversations and know that we care for each other, that we really have our best interest at heart. And I'm fortunate to now be surrounded by men like that. And that is a big part of my own strength, is that I have men that I can talk to when I make a mistake in my relationship with my wife and something gets off kilter. I have men that I can talk to. I can express the fact that, man, I really screwed up. I don't know what the heck I did here, but let me talk through what I did. And they can sit and listen to me, and they can say, "Well, man, here's what I think you did, and this, that, whatever." Or they can tell me, "Hey, screwball, yeah, you did do the wrong thing. Here's what you need to do to get back on the right track." And we can have those conversations. And I gain tremendous amount of strength from being around men that are going down the path that I want to go down.
One of the things you mention in your book is about the crisis of masculinity, even amongst the religious people. Even you mentioned, obviously, in Christianity. And I've actually experienced that as well, because I travel in religious circles as well. And when I look at some of the religious people, many of them are out of shape. Many of them also have sedentary lifestyles, and they have the same issues that the secular world are having in terms of, lack of drive, mental confusion, fog, even though they still are affiliated to some religious order and have knowledge of divine laws. So it seems like even they have not been sort of foolproof from this issue and crisis that is engulfed the mainstream of society as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it starts with a lack of knowledge. There are certain things that aren't being taught within a lot of churches and religious organizations. As a Christian, I read God talks about that He gives us a spirit not of fear or timidity, but of
Yeah.
power, love, and self-discipline. But when I look in a lot of the churches, I don't see. I see fearfulness. I see timidity. I see men that stand on the sidelines. They don't engage. They're not involved. When it comes time, somebody says, "Hey, who wants to pray?" 3 wives put their hands up, and all the men sit silent. And I'm like, hang on, I'll pray, And it's like, we need to engage. Self-discipline. To your point, every church event we have seems to have food, and it's not good food. It's not men standing at the grill making meat. It's food that is
Drowning in oil, fats.
yes, it's just adding to the problem. We talk about gluttony. We don't talk about gluttony in the church, because if we did, we would
I
be
know the
hitting
answer to
90.
that.
We know we would be hitting 95% of the people in the church, and too often the pastor himself, the man that stands in front of the entire congregation, is 40 pounds overweight, and we expect him to speak about the sin of gluttony and laziness. And that's a lot. Now, I will tell you this, and I know you've seen the same thing. I see a groundswell. It's starting to happen. Men like us, there's men like us around the world that are like, okay, that's enough. And they're leaning in, and they are starting to bring this about, and I'm starting to see this within Christianity and within religious organizations, where men are becoming more fit, they're starting to recognize, all these things are tied together. Like, how am I going to be the disciplined man that's the rock for my family and for my wife, and I'm bringing this strength? How am I going to be all that when I'm 40 pounds overweight? Those two things, they don't go together. Like, the way I eat, it impacts the way I feel.
Absolutely.
And the way I think and how I conduct myself. And so, men are starting to see it, and I can feel a groundswell. Your podcast here is an example of men that are seeing this and saying, okay, I can either stand on the sidelines and complain about it, or I can do something about it. For me, it was write the book. I'm not the type of guy that stands on the sideline. I'm like, absolutely, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to give these men out there a vision of how to conquer this and how to become a man that their wives respect and admire, their children admire and want to be like. I say, be the man that you want your son to become and you want your daughter to marry. Be that man.
Yeah.
Be that man.
What you said resonated so much about the religious circles, because we too have events where after the event we have a big feast with food laid down. It's all high in carbs, drowned in oil, really everything against the grain in terms of healthy eating. And we look around, our peers are overweight. Sometimes the imam, the person leading the congregation, giving the lecture at the front, is overweight. So we really need to get our own house in order. The reason we are like that is because we've stopped following our role model. The best of creation for us is our Prophet Muhammad, who used to go many days without food, who used to tie stones around his waist so they can suppress their appetite and the pangs of hunger. And they did not overindulge in eating and all the worldly pleasures that we are now engrossed in to our own detriment. And I was reading a great book just last night that everything starts from the stomach. This is really interesting, Jerry. Everything starts from the stomach. Man has never filled a vessel more worse than his own stomach. So once we start wanting to eat all the different delights and the foods and the different spices, what that does, it actually makes us, triggers our sexual appetite, right? Once that triggers your sexual appetite, then you want to attract the opposite gender. When you want to attract the opposite gender, then you want to have money and you want to have status to be able to attract that best mate or person of the opposite gender. Then you want to start indulging in worldly pursuits for money, name, and fame. And that's what is the slippery slope towards destruction. And what? It starts with the stomach. How fascinating is that?
That is very fascinating. Yeah. No, that's very fascinating. It's these are interesting times that we live in, but I see them as an opportunity. We are here in this time for a reason, and I believe that. And so, like I said, we are here to make a difference, to get in the game, not stay on the sidelines. We need to be in the game.
I think a lot of people are now looking for leadership. I think there's a huge vacuum here which we need to step in, and we need to raise our game, and we need to reach out to people. At the moment, the vacuum is being filled with the likes of Andrew Tate, who have reached huge popularity in the last sort of couple of years because this very views that they hold which go against the mainstream narrative of what men should be like, and they're trying to steer people back towards the masculine self. But again, I don't want to go into a long discussion about his views, But what I'm trying to point out is that the vacuum is sometimes being filled by other people who may not necessarily be the best role models. So that's why I think the vacuum needs to be filled by the people who have connection with the divine laws and connection with a spiritual order, who can guide them in the best moral and ethical way. It's been a long chat, and it's been great talking to you. Let's hear some final words of advice from yourself before we wrap this podcast up for today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It has been a good conversation. So, for me, I would say, I talk about this in my book. It's for men. We need to paint a picture. Who is the man that you want to be? Who do you desire to be? And I said, be the man that you want your son to become. Be the man that you hope your daughter marries. What's that look like? What's that man? That's the peak of the mountain. That might be 14,000 foot peak. I like to backpack. I've been on mountains. And so you look at the bottom of that mountain, you're looking up at this peak, and it seems like it's a huge obstacle. Like, how in the world am I going to get to that peak? And so there's going to be a lot of men that they might listen to this and they might feel like that's where I am. I look up at that thing, and in a lot of cases, they just give up. They see that and they think, man, I can't make it to that peak. But what I would say is, look at that peak. Who do you want to be as a man? And then look back at your feet and think about what's the first step. Stop looking at the peak. Take the first step.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, take the second step. And every day, if you're doing something to move yourself closer to becoming that man, every day, 365 days a year, if you did something every day to make you stronger in body, mind, and spirit, you would be an entirely different man in a year.
Absolutely.
And everything around you will improve. I can guarantee you, if you become a better, stronger man, if you become good at being a good man, that your entire life will be different a year from now. Guaranteed.
Fantastic.
Guaranteed.
Sometimes even a small shift in your thinking can create a seismic shift in your life's direction, even in a space of 24 hours. But again, that seismic shift requires action to put that new way of thinking into action. But it's great advice there, Jerry. It's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you, and no doubt this is a hot topic which is not going away soon, and it's only going to increase in its intensity, and we hope to pick this up with you again in the future. And if anybody wants to read more into the insights that you have written, it's the Men of Grit Story of Steel. And where can they get a copy from?
Here you get
Strong as Steel.
Strong as Steel. Yep. How to Build a Legacy of Unbreakable Strength. So you can get a copy of that on Amazon. So if you just type in Men of Grit, Strong as Steel, you can get a copy there on Amazon. And if you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter, men_of_grit.
Excellent.
That's where I'm most active.
No doubt, great wisdom that you can share, especially with the younger men out there who are aspiring to become more manly and masculine. Thank you so much, Jerry, and we'll be in touch again soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Enjoyed it. Thank you. Appreciate it.